Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
It's a trifecta that very few have achieved. Win the Heisman, perfect season, national championship. As they say in the Bayou, laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. LSU sits on the throne of college football. The confetti shower inside the Superdome, and somewhere down there, Tom Rinaldi with a happy coach up.
Chris, thank you very much. Ed, everything you've been through, all it took to get here. When you look up and you see that confetti fall, what goes through you?
Homie, where you make it?
You like to see homos naked?
Homie, where you make it?
Yeah, you like to see homos naked? That's cool, man. Whatever.
No. Homie, where you make it? Home, where you make it?
Oh.
Everybody know that. Goddamn, boy.
Let's start it off with what happened on Monday night. College football, national championship, LSU, Clemson. LSU 42, Clemson 25, Joe Burrow 463 yards and 5 touchdowns against the defending national champions. Wow. I mean, we already knew he was locked in number 1 overall pick. There's no way the Bengals were going to miss him as the kid from Ohio, but he basically made a big, fat statement that I'm not just a blip in the radar. I am an NFL talent because I beat a team that has potentially a whole defense of NFL players. You look at that national title game, if I told you 75% of those guys were going to be in the pros, you probably believe me, right?
I would believe that this is probably one of the best matchups that we've seen in a college football playoff final, right? Like, so for a national championship, because a lot of people thought Ohio State was the best Ohio State team that we've ever seen, and Clemson came in and beat them. Clemson was also the defending national champs, and then you have LSU that just had a historic season, went undefeated. And so you have these two juggernauts. And honestly, you're exactly right. I think in the first 2 rounds, the majority of the people whose names are going to be called, they're going to be coming from one of these 2 schools. And if you include Ohio State, right, and maybe even Oklahoma possibly, right, the guys that finished in the college football playoffs, you're going to hear a lot of those names coming from a lot of those schools.
The main things there's going to be like question marks that are going to follow Joe Burrow when it comes down to this journey is like when you look at the sheer talent he had around him, that Jamar Chase kid, oh my God. Like, was there anyone on Clemson that could stop him? He embarrassed that cornerback there so much that they basically had to tell him take a seat during the game. I mean, 221 yards on 9 catches for 2 touchdowns. Then you had Randy Moss's kid who's just carrying on the family legacy at the tight end position. How fun is it going to see to have Thaddeus Moss in the NFL soon? One of my dreams is that he gets drafted by whatever team Tom Brady is at age 50. That way we could see Moss, Brady one more time.
I know. No, it's exciting. I always love when you see, kids of really good athletes coming up, right? It's sort of reminiscent of the old days. Do I think he's as good of an athlete as maybe Randy Moss? I mean, he's up there. He's still going to be really good. I don't know if he's quite at his dad's level. But
a little thicker. You definitely tell that tight end build is a little bit more on him.
Oh, yeah. 100%. But no, I mean, this LSU team, they were just fantastic. I mean, even rushing, right? They had Edwards had 110 yards. Burrow had a rushing touchdown. All over. This team was just stacked with talent on both the offensive end and the defensive end.
And yeah, in fact, Burrow, he set the all-time touchdown record for college football with 60 passing touchdowns, which is just what? Mm-hmm. You have less games than the NFL season. And isn't it more poetic too that he also broke that throwing it to Thaddeus Moss?
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. Like, this kid is just going to go so far. It's going to be fun to see him. I don't care if he gets drafted by Cincinnati, Carolina, Miami, whoever you want to throw out there. I think it'd be a mistake if Cincinnati traded out of that position. I think that they just need to get this kid because we mentioned it the previous week. Even if you don't buy in fully as Joe Burrow, as an NFL talent, as a NFL difference maker, I think he's the right selection for that team.
Oh, yeah. And, well, here's what impressed me really about this game is that Joe Burrow, like Clemson, a lot of people had Clemson as being the number 1 defense in college football, right? And if not number 1, definitely up there within probably the top 5. And they were throwing everything they could at Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow got hit a few times, and he got right back up and was able to make those adjustments. He was able to audible. He was able to read the defense. He saw everything that was coming, and he just did a fantastic job. I mean, anybody that can adjust to that level of defense, right? In Clemson, a lot of times it gets touted as basically a pro-level defense, and he was able to make those adjustments. So if if I'm in the Cincinnati spot, right, and I've got to figure out who to draft, I would 100% be comfortable with drafting Joe Burrow. And I think his floor is maybe a lot higher than people give him credit for. I know he did not pan out his first few years in college. I know a lot of people say that, it's just the Ed Orgeron system, but I think Joe Burrow is going to be fantastic at the pro level.
Well, it's not necessarily the Ed Orgeron system. It's this what's his name, Joe Bryant system.
Yeah.
Who he's now officially the OC out there for Matt Rule in Carolina. That's why a lot of people are linking the Panthers to potentially wanting to trade up. I don't think it's going to happen because, again, if you're Cincinnati, I feel like Carolina has to get you in like a bear hug or something that makes you want to like give up that position because you stay put. You need to get a franchise quarterback. I'd rather go broke drafting a franchise quarterback than doing what Cleveland did and just like passing on talented offensive performers like Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes for years, and now they're stuck in this weird limbo that Cleveland's been stuck in. So just draft the quarterback. Make it easy on yourself. That's the way I see that.
Yeah. Also, I think there is something to say about storylines, right? Is in sports, everybody likes to see a storyline. And you have an Ohio kid that went to Ohio State, things didn't pan out, he had to leave. And now you can bring him back to his home state of Ohio, and he could potentially, take your team to the next level, right? If he can get Cincinnati back into playoff contention and he's a local Ohio kid, the fans would love that. I think the NFL would love it. People would tune in to see Cincinnati games, I think. Now, granted, Cincinnati is a mess of an organization, and I almost feel bad for Joe Burrow going there. I think, if he had a really talented front office around him, Joe Burrow could do a lot of things. He's going to be much more limited in Cincinnati. We know their ownership and management isn't as good as some of these other teams. But I think there is something to be said about the storyline and it just being a good story of having him go back to his home state.
Yeah, my apologies. I butchered his name. It's Joe Brady, actually, who's now the OC in Carolina. But yeah, give it to this LSU team. They were number one pretty much the entire season in a lot of people's eyes, even if the rankings didn't always reflect it. And a lot of people had their questions when they jumped to number one during the final BCS or final college football rankings. People were like, Ohio State, you can make that argument there. Clemson, defending champion, how can they drop all the way to 3? Well, they lived up to their ranking. They are, in fact, the first number one overall seed to win it since we switched over to the playoff format. So they held strong. And, God, Ed Orgeron, he just has a way with the words, man. Go Tigers.
Yeah, no, I love listening to Ed O speak. And just the margins of victory that LSU had, especially in the playoffs. I mean, it went 42-25 this game. And I can't remember what the score was exactly when they played Oklahoma, but that game was never close, right? And so just the sheer level of dominance that this team had was truly special.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to, beat up on Oklahoma. I mean, we know how bad that defense is, but again, you have so much NFL talent on the other side of the ball. Even if Clemson lost a lot of talent along the defensive line, overall, that's still a talented defense, and they made them look like chump change. Made them look like ordinary. And it's going to be interesting to see how Clemson bounces back next season. They're already the preseason number one overall pick in a lot of people's minds. Vegas has already picked them to be back in this game next year, hoisting up the trophy, which I can see because they still have that guy, Trevor Lawrence, on their team. And Trevor Lawrence, he didn't play as well as we would probably like. Obviously, the final game score reflects that. I do think that they got a little bit burned on that offensive pass interference towards the end of the game. I do think that, could you have called it? You probably could have tucked that one back in your pocket and just let that be a touchdown. But he showed why he's going to be the number one overall pick in the 2021 draft. Because, I mean, he's got everything. He's got all the tools. He can run. He can pass. He's a great athlete. I don't think you have anything to worry about. A lot of the national media has bought into this theory that, does this kind of make you think twice about Trevor Lawrence? No, not at all. There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be tanking for Trevor next year. And
I
can see why. He has the talent. It's like falling into that Andrew Luck draft, falling into that Peyton Manning draft, which is funny that the Colts did that both times. I wonder if that's going to hold true again.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, I think the thing, it's almost absurd, too, that he has to even go back to play. He's so proven. We saw what he did as a freshman. We saw what he did as a sophomore. And the fact that he has to even go back and risk getting hurt, and we've already seen Tua, right? And I hope he has a fast and, smooth, simple recovery. But like the fact that Trevor Lawrence has to even go back to college to risk getting hurt, like I would take him number one right now. Top two. I would argue, right, that Joe Burrow has maybe earned that number one spot this year. But if Trevor Lawrence goes this year, there's even debate that maybe you take Trevor Lawrence over Joe Burrow. And so I don't think that this game impacts his stock at all. And if anything, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I would almost hesitate to maybe take a red shirt next year and just sit out. Though I know people wouldn't like that. I know the NFL wouldn't like that. But I just feel bad. I hope he doesn't, 100% hope he does not get injured next year.
Well, here's where the two sports differ. Here's where football and the NBA differ. You need to be on the field because you earn so much more credit with not only fans, but your teammates by them having you on the field. And that's what football guys like to see. That's what coaches like to see. GMs like to see. You don't think if Trevor Lawrence sat out an entire year, there wouldn't be coaches at the combine that would be like, I don't know about this guy. I don't know if he has that passion to necessarily lead us, which you can argue, hey, then you're going to miss out on one of the most amazing generational talents just because you don't buy into his mentality. But you know what's that old saying? Like 90% of the game is mental, and I do think that being out there, being on the field, being a leader is what elevates quarterbacks more than any other position and why it's the most important position in the game. And all things considered, come on, quarterbacks, there's so many rules to protect them that I don't think he's at risk as much as other positions that we'll get into later.
Yeah, no, I mean, without a doubt, that's true. And people don't realize how big Trevor Lawrence is. Like on TV, you see him with his long, silky hair, right? And he's sort of like, he's kind of tall, and you're like, oh, he seems like a small little dude. Like he's a big dude still. So the risk of injury, like you said, I think is a lot lower than some of the other positions. But still, like, okay, if he redshirted, you wouldn't take him number one overall?
Well, I would have my questions, especially if, let's say, someone got hot at the right time in the same way that Joe Burrow got hot this year. Like, let's say Justin Fields has an amazing season next year. Then it's going to make that question a little bit closer in my mind. I still like Trevor Lawrence, the prospect, a little bit more just because of his physical tools, his assets. But I would look at Justin Fields as the better prospect because I saw him out on the field. I saw him balling out. He was there for his teammates, his leadership. And all things considered, if you're Trevor Lawrence, that sucks because that's also going to hurt your pocketbook.
Yeah, that's true, right? And the last game would be Trevor Lawrence going out on a loss, right, if he did take a red shirt next year. And that would be the last that you would remember him.
And, too, I think the big thing why football has this rule that makes players go to college, makes them play in college, is there is something to be said about allowing their bodies to develop a little bit more for the NFL game. Because when you have these just freak athletes, I mean, hell, Jadeveon Clowney had to sit back and wait a couple years before the NFL deemed him ready because your risk of injury when you're talking about just the monsters that play in the NFL is so much greater that I don't think a 19-year-old kid would be ready for that. I do think that there's something to being in an NFL strength and conditioning program versus that at the college level or even the high school level, that the younger you are, the less prepared you are. I mean, your body doesn't really even mature till you're like 25.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely a point to that, right, is that I think you're exactly right. The game of basketball is a lot less contact, obviously, right? You're not getting tackled. And sometimes there's hard fouls, but it's much more of a finesse sport. And if you could jump high and run fast, it doesn't matter what age you are, you'll be pretty good at basketball. But, if you're 18 years old and you get blasted by a linebacker, right, like you might not be able to perform anymore. You might not even be able to walk at that point. So without a doubt, I definitely think there's something to it. Either way, though, I'm excited to see Trevor Lawrence when he does get to the NFL. I think he's going number one overall next year. I mean, maybe he regresses a little bit, but even still, I would take him number one.
Would you rank Clemson as your preseason number one for next year as well? Fall in stride with the Vegas predictors? I mean, you're still going to have Ohio State there. They're going to return a lot of players. You have to figure Alabama might have a comeback year.
I think I ranked them number one overall still is because of the returning players and the fact that Dabo Swinney is one heck of a coach. Like that dude knows what he's doing. And granted, they couldn't pull it off against LSU this year, but that dude knows what he's doing. And I think he's even up there with Nick Saban, right? Like he might even be better than Saban.
Yeah. I mean, there's ton of talent. I mean, it was a great game. Even if the score was, over the Vegas line, it was a great game because we got to see a lot of players that we want to see at the next level on the field, playing their heart out for that trophy. It was a great story. Like I said, this is one of the biggest senior seasons that like a player could have. And I'm glad for Joe Burrow. And hey, we'll talk about him more as the combine hits and his pro day hits. And officially he's holding that orange and black striped Bengals jersey with Roger Goodell on draft day.
What does this night, this season mean to the heart of Louisiana from someone from here who represents it?
Go
Go ahead and say it, Ed.
Izquierdo.